If you're anything like me, you really first encountered the word empath when you were researching narcissistic abuse or emotional abuse. Now, you may have heard it before, I'm sure I have, but it didn't really stand out to me until I started looking into this connection, because there seems to be a really strong connection between the two. But before you understand that connection, you have to understand what an empath really is and what it means to be an empath. So that's what we're going to explore in today's video. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Common Ego community. My name is Christina, and today we're talking about what it means to be an empath. Now, if you've heard this term before as you're exploring emotional abuse or narcissistic abuse, you may have come to one of two conclusions based on the information that's out there. One, an empath has superpowers, kind of like a video game character. Two, an empath is weak. Now, one of those things is true, and I'll bet you can guess which one. An empath does have superpowers. An empath is not inherently weak. It's actually, the abilities are actually a strength when you know how to use them. But before we get to that, let's explore what an empath really is. To understand what an empath is, we really need to explore empathy. And that's essentially the basis of being an empath. It's a very heightened sense of empathy. And to understand empathy, let's look at a definition. According to the Oxford Dictionary, empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Now, we have to understand that that's a very broad and short definition. And digging into empathy, we can look at three different types. There are three types of empathy that you could have. And you could have all of them, or you can have just one of them. Or you can have two of them. So let's see what they are. The first one is cognitive empathy. Now this one's interesting because we know that narcissists and most severely emotionally abusive people struggle with empathy. They have impaired empathy, or maybe they have no empathy. But here's where it gets tricky. They do have what's called cognitive empathy. And this means that they can understand your feelings. It's a logical understanding of your emotions. They don't feel it, and they may not always understand it. But most narcissists have that cognitive understanding, and that's how they abuse you. Because if you think about it, they wouldn't be able to abuse you if they were just completely in the dark about what emotions are, right? They have a cognitive understanding. They understand if they do this, you'll react this way. So they get that connection logically. And that's cognitive empathy. The next one is emotional empathy. And emotional empathy is the superpower of the empath. But emotionally healthy people have emotional empathy. Empaths have it in spades. So emotional empathy is the ability to feel other people's emotions. Now, it's normal for someone to feel if you see something terribly sad and it affects you. This is everyone, I shouldn't say everyone, most people can feel this on some level. Empaths feel it to a greater degree, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a little. But first, let's get to the third type of empathy, and that's compassionate empathy. Compassionate empathy is the need or strong desire to act on your feelings of emotional empathy. So you have to have emotional empathy really before you have compassionate empathy. And now most empaths will have some form of compassionate empathy. But if an empath is particularly wounded, they may not have it or they may not show it. So someone with a high level of compassionate empathy is somebody who's going to put themselves in positions to help people. And it's not for their personal gain, it's because they feel that on a deep level, and they are just driven to help. So we know that emotional empathy is the one that we really want to focus on here to determine whether you are or are not an empath. Now, before we get into that, let me just put a little disclaimer here. If you are an empath, that is great. You do have superpowers that you can use. You have an amazing intuition. But if you are not, that is great too. You can still have a strong sense of empathy, emotional empathy, and you can use that to your advantage. And you can still be an amazing, thoughtful, deep, and caring human being. One is not necessarily better than the other. So if you listen to what I have to say next and you don't relate to it, that is okay. There's nothing wrong here. What does it really mean to be an empath? If you're an empath, you have probably at one point or another felt assaulted by other people's emotions. You take them on so strongly that you can't really separate their emotions from your emotions. And it's a problem for you. Now, with that, there's one caveat. It's very easy to be assaulted or feel assaulted by somebody's sense of extreme anger. So if you only feel assaulted by someone else's anger, you may not be an empath, and that's okay. But if you are in a room with somebody who is extremely sad, and maybe they don't even talk to you about it, but you could just tell they're sad, and it brings you down, it makes you feel sad, then you're probably an empath. Another common trait of empaths is a very strong intuition, and that kind of goes along with being able to sense other people's emotions, being able to feel them. Because you can walk into a room and you can instinctively feel out what's going on. You know if somebody over there is sending out bad vibes, they got bad energy over there, or if somebody over here is really happy. You don't really have to think about it, you just instinctively know that that's what's going on. So you can sense danger very quickly. So if you've had a strong intuition for the majority of your life, you're probably an empath. One of the major benefits of being an empath is that you have a very high level of emotional intelligence. And that means you can really connect with people very easily. Now, you can have a high level of emotional intelligence without being an empath, but it's just a different level when you feel someone else's emotions on a deep level. And if you've been in an emotionally abusive relationship for some time, you may be in a weird position right now. You might feel like, well, I kind of relate to that stuff and I used to be that way, but I don't really feel connected with it right now. And that's completely normal. Actually, I have a video about that should pop up over here. And if you'd like to learn more, definitely take a look. But the good news is that this is something that you can reconnect with easily just by focusing on yourself, focusing on self-love and the things that are important to you as a person. When you learn to love yourself and trust your own emotions over other people's, learn to separate the two, it really does become like a superpower. You can use that power for your own greater good. You can use it to figure out your path in life, where you want to go, where you need to go, and you can also use it for the greater good of us all if you feel so inclined. So now I want to hear from you. Do you identify as an empath? And if so, have you found yourself in a relationship with a narcissist or another emotionally abusive person? It's very common, but let me know in the comments. If you like this video, please let me know by liking it, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to get notified whenever I post new videos. That's all for now. Talk soon.